How does a night of make-believe, of costumes and harmless fun, curdle into a real-life horror story? What happens when a joyful cultural tradition, misunderstood, collides with a wall of fear so absolute that it ends in a flash of gunfire? On Halloween night in 1992, in a quiet suburb of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a 16-year-old Japanese exchange student named Yoshihiro Hattori, dressed as a movie character and full of laughter, made a simple, innocent mistake. He knocked on the wrong door. This single, small error would not only cost him his life, but would also ignite an international firestorm, leaving a ghost that haunts the conscience of two nations. Yoshihiro Hattori, known to his friends as Yoshi, was a vibrant and curious teenager, embracing his year abroad with infectious enthusiasm. For his first American Halloween, he and his host brother, Webb Haymaker, decided to attend a party for fellow exchange students. Yoshi, a fan of American movies, meticulously crafted a costume to look like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. He wore a white tuxedo jacket, ruffled shirt, and black pants. He was not a monster or a ghoul. He was a dancer, a symbol of joyful energy, a boy on his way to a party. The night was mild and humid, typical for late October in Louisiana. Around 8 p.m., Yoshi and Webb set out, excited for the evening ahead. They drove to a quiet, middle-class neighborhood in Central, a suburb of Baton Rouge. The directions they had were simple, but in the darkness, the identical-looking houses and winding streets became confusing. Believing they had arrived, they walked confidently up the driveway of a modest brick ranch house, decorated not with jack-o'-lanterns, but with a simple string of Christmas lights. It was the wrong address. Inside that house lived Rodney Peairs, a 30-year-old supermarket butcher, his wife Bonnie, and their children. Hearing the doorbell and seeing two figures in the carport, Bonnie Peairs became alarmed. The way the boys approached, quickly and with purpose, seemed unusual to her. She called to her husband, who was in a back room, telling him to get his gun. This single, panicked decision set in motion a tragedy that would unfold in a matter of seconds. Fear, potent and irrational, was now in control of the house. Rodney Peairs retrieved a .44 Magnum revolver, a powerful handgun, and went to the carport door. He opened it to see Yoshi, smiling and possibly holding a camera, just a few feet away. Yoshi, with his limited English and exuberant personality, may have thought this was part of the American Halloween experience. A playful scare. He called out, "We're here for the party," and continued moving forward, perhaps to greet the man in the doorway. He was a guest arriving, not an intruder, but in the dim light, his excited movements were catastrophically misinterpreted. Rodney Peairs, seeing the approaching figure who did not stop, yelled the word "freeze." For a native English speaker, the command is an unambiguous, terrifying order to stop all movement. But for Yoshi, the word was unfamiliar. A piece of American slang he had likely only heard in movies. He may have thought it was part of the trick or treat game. He continued to move forward, his arms open, a wide grin on his face. The cultural chasm between the two was absolute. One saw a party guest, the other saw an imminent, inexplicable threat. The gap between misunderstanding and violence was closed in an instant. As Yoshi moved closer, Rodney Peairs, believing his family was in danger from this smiling, costumed intruder who ignored his command, fired a single shot. The powerful bullet struck Yoshi in the chest, the impact throwing him backward. The loud crack of the magnum shattered the quiet suburban night. Webb Haymaker watched in horror as his friend collapsed to the ground. The white tuxedo jacket instantly stained with a spreading circle of dark red. The party was over before it had even begun. The immediate aftermath was a scene of surreal horror and confusion. Bonnie Peairs screamed and slammed the door shut, retreating into the supposed safety of her house. Webb rushed to Yoshi's side, seeing the life drain from his friend's eyes. He ran to the house next door for help, the house where the party was actually taking place. His cries for an ambulance cutting through the sounds of music and laughter. The paramedics arrived quickly, but it was too late. Yoshihiro Hattori was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, a victim of a fatal cultural misunderstanding. The investigation began that night, but it was unlike any typical homicide. The shooter was not on the run. He was inside his house, waiting for the police. When they arrived, Rodney Peairs immediately surrendered his weapon and made his statement. He was calm, coherent, and consistent. He told the officers that he was a family man who had been terrified by the strange, fast-approaching figure on his property. He claimed he shot in fear for his life and the lives of his family. He uttered the words that would become the cornerstone of his defense. "I'm sorry, but I had to do it." The initial challenge for investigators was not determining the facts of what happened. Those were tragically clear. But navigating the complex legal landscape of Louisiana's self-defense laws. The Castle Doctrine gives homeowners significant latitude to use lethal force against intruders. The central question for the police, and later the prosecutor, was whether Rodney Peairs' fear was reasonable. Could a reasonable person, under the same circumstances, believe they were in imminent danger of great bodily harm or death from an unarmed 5'6", 130-pound teenager in a tuxedo costume? The physical evidence told a stark story. The single bullet casing on the carport floor, the powerful .44 Magnum, the autopsy report confirming the fatal wound. But the most perplexing pieces of evidence were intangible. There was Yoshi's costume, a symbol of celebration, not aggression. There was his cheerful, non-threatening demeanor, as described by Webb Haymaker. And there was the sheer proximity of the shot, fired from only a few feet away. These elements created a narrative was deeply at odds with Rodney Peairs' claim of mortal fear. The case quickly garnered national and then international attention. In Japan, a country with nearly non-existent gun violence, the story was met with shock and profound disbelief. The idea that a homeowner could shoot and kill a lost teenager on their doorstep and potentially face no legal consequences was incomprehensible. Yoshi's parents, Masachi and Miko Hattori, flew to the United States, their personal grief suddenly becoming a symbol of a massive cultural divide. Their quiet dignity in the face of unimaginable loss captivated a global audience. The breakthrough in the case was the district attorney's decision. After a week of intense deliberation and public pressure, to charge Rodney Peairs with manslaughter. This was not a foregone conclusion. Many legal observers believed the case would be ruled a justifiable homicide under Louisiana's broad self-defense statutes. The decision to prosecute was a pivotal moment, signaling that the state believed a line had been crossed, that a homeowner's fear, however genuine it might have felt, was not an absolute license to kill. The stage was set for a dramatic legal battle. The trial of Rodney Peairs began in May 1993 and became a flashpoint for cultural and legal debates. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Doug Morrow, argued that Peairs' actions were not those of a reasonable man. They painted Yoshi as a boy full of life, a fish out of water whose exuberant, friendly nature was tragically misinterpreted. They emphasized that Yoshi was unarmed, smiling, and that Peairs had ample opportunity to simply close and lock the door and call the police. They argued that the use of a .44 Magnum was an extreme and unnecessary overreaction. The defense, on the other hand, built their case entirely around the concept of fear. They portrayed Rodney Peairs as an ordinary man, a husband and father, thrust into a terrifying situation. His attorney argued that the totality of the circumstances, the darkness, the unusual approach of two strangers, one of whom moved erratically and ignored a command to freeze, created a reasonable fear of a home invasion. They presented Peairs not as a killer, but as a victim of circumstance, forced to make a split-second, life-or-death decision to protect his family. The trial lasted for 7 days. Webb Haymaker gave a heartbreaking, tearful testimony about his friend's final moments. Rodney Peairs himself took the stand, breaking down in tears as he recounted the shooting, insisting he was terrified and that he saw Yoshi as an Oriental person who was out to do me great bodily harm. The jury, composed of residents of East Baton Rouge Parish, listened intently. The fate of Rodney Peairs, and in many ways, the interpretation of Louisiana's self-defense laws, rested in their hands. The aftermath of the trial's conclusion was a moment of collective shock that reverberated around the world. After deliberating for only 3 hours, the jury returned with their verdict. Not guilty. Rodney Peairs was acquitted of all charges. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Outside, Peairs and his family celebrated with their lawyer. The Hattori family, who had sat through every moment of the trial, remained stoic, their faces masks of quiet devastation. The American legal system had declared that shooting and killing their unarmed son was not a crime. The verdict was met with outrage and condemnation in Japan. It was seen as a stunning indictment of American gun culture and a legal system that seemed to prioritize the right to own a gun over the right to life. The story fueled a perception of the United States as a violent, unpredictable place where a simple mistake could get you killed. The acquittal did more damage to U.S.-Japan relations than any political incident in recent memory, leaving a deep and lasting scar. But the legal battle was not over. The Hattori family, along with the Haymakers, filed a civil lawsuit against Rodney Peairs. In a civil trial, the burden of proof is lower than in a criminal trial. They did not need to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, only that Peairs was liable for the death based on a preponderance of the evidence. In this new legal arena, they hoped for a different outcome, a form of justice that the criminal court had denied them. In the civil trial, the judge found Rodney Peairs liable for the death of Yoshihiro Hattori, ruling that his use of lethal force was not justified. The judge stated that there was no justification for the killing of this young man. He awarded the Hattori family over $650,000 in damages. While it was a symbolic victory, it was a powerful one. A court had officially declared that the shooting was wrong. Peairs appealed the verdict, but the ruling was upheld. The legacy of Yoshihiro Hattori's death is profound and far-reaching. It is a story that has been told and retold, a modern parable about the tragic consequences of fear, misunderstanding, and the easy availability of deadly weapons. The case became a catalyst for a powerful movement led by Yoshi's own parents, who transformed their unimaginable grief into a tireless crusade for change, ensuring their son's death would not be in vain. Masachi and Miko Hattori returned to Japan not in defeat, but with a new, powerful sense of purpose. They became two of the most vocal and effective advocates for gun control in the United States. They started a petition in Japan calling for stricter gun laws in America and gathered over 1.7 million signatures. They presented this petition to President Bill Clinton, bringing their message of peace and their story of loss to the highest levels of the U.S. government. Their activism, along with the public outcry over other high-profile shootings, played a significant role in the political momentum that led to the passage of the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act in 1993. This landmark piece of federal legislation mandated background checks for firearm purchases and imposed a 5-day waiting period. While it's impossible to draw a direct causal line, the Hattori family's powerful advocacy was undeniably a part of the national conversation that made such reform possible. The story was immortalized in the Academy Award-winning documentary, The Shot Heard Round the World, which detailed the case and its cultural fallout. The film brought the tragedy to an even wider audience, cementing its place as a key moment in the history of the gun control debate. It ensured that future generations would learn about Yoshi, not just as a statistic, but as a vibrant young boy whose life was cut short by a cascade of tragic errors. In the years following the shooting, the Haymaker family, who had hosted Yoshi, also became advocates for cultural understanding and gun safety. They established the FSUSA Yoshi Hattori Memorial Scholarship, a fund that helps American high school students study in Japan, hoping to build the kind of cultural bridges that might have saved Yoshi's life. They sought to create a positive legacy of understanding from an event born of misunderstanding. Rodney Peairs continued to live in his home in central Louisiana. He lost the civil suit and was ordered to pay the damages, though it's reported that his insurance company covered a portion of it. He has rarely spoken publicly about the incident since the trials. He remains a polarizing figure, seen by some as a man who was wrongly prosecuted for defending his home, and by others as a man who got away with a senseless killing. His life, too, was forever defined by those few seconds on Halloween night. The case also forced a difficult conversation within the United States about the castle doctrine and stand your ground laws. It raised uncomfortable questions about the definition of a reasonable fear. Is it reasonable to shoot an unarmed person who does not speak your language? Does a costume on Halloween change the dynamic of a potential threat? These questions continue to be debated in courtrooms and state legislatures across the country, and the ghost of Yoshi Hattori is always present in those discussions. In Japan, Yoshi is remembered as a symbol of youthful innocence lost to American violence. Schools use his story to teach students about the importance of cultural awareness and the potential dangers of traveling abroad. The case is a permanent part of the national psyche, a sad story that is known by almost everyone, a warning passed down through generations. The house on Bennett Road in central Louisiana still stands. It is an ordinary brick house on an ordinary suburban street, but for those who know the story, it is a place of profound sadness, a memorial to a fatal mistake. It is a physical reminder that a home, meant to be a place of safety, can also be the site of a tragedy that reaches across oceans and decades. The eerie element that lingers most is the role of Halloween itself, the one night of the year when strangers in costumes are expected to approach a house. when unusual behavior is the norm, became the backdrop for a killing justified by unusual behavior. The festive, chaotic nature of the holiday, which should have provided a context for Yoshi's actions, was instead stripped away, leaving only a raw, primal fear. The disguise was not on Yoshi, but on the night itself. The story is a powerful testament to the fact that personal fear, however real it may feel to an individual, can have devastating and irreversible consequences for others. It forces us to question the line between self-preservation and aggression, between caution and paranoia. Rodney Peairs may have genuinely been afraid, but his fear, filtered through a lens of cultural unfamiliarity and amplified by a powerful weapon, became a force of destruction. The ultimate horror of the story is its sheer, pointless tragedy. There was no malice, no premeditated plan. It was a perfect storm of small, unfortunate events. A wrong turn, a confusing address, a language barrier, a panicked reaction, and a readily available gun. It was a tragedy of errors, a domino rally of misfortune, where the final domino to fall was a young boy's life. The legacy of Yoshihiro Hattori is not just one of sadness, but one of action. His parents' extraordinary grace and strength in the face of their loss created tangible change. They did not succumb to hatred or despair, but instead chose to build a legacy of peace and understanding in their son's name. They ensured that his story would be a catalyst for good, a plea for a more sensible and less violent world. And so, we are left with a haunting question that echoes from that Halloween night in 1992. Where does reasonable fear end and tragic overreaction begin? The story of Yoshihiro Hattori provides no simple answer, only a chilling and heartbreaking reminder that the most terrifying monsters are not the ones in costumes, but the ones born from our own fear, and that sometimes the simple act of knocking on the wrong door can have fatal consequences.